After failing to use dark magic to resurrect, Camus was left with a backlash that brought her close to death. But her uncle Snape volunteered to give his life for hers, stepping into the realm of death in her place. His body remained behind, insects beginning to swarm around it. The entire underground chamber was silent, with only Snake and Camus present. She lay still beside his cold, lifeless form, her eyes barely focused as they drifted over to her deceased uncle. Exhausted, she wondered how much time has passed. Her body felt like it was burning up, and she couldn't move anymore. Camus lay there, motionless like a corpse. Although she was conscious, it felt no different than being dead. In despair, she thought to herself, so this is the price of stubbornly using forbidden resurrection magic. No one even knows about this hidden place deep beneath the dark hall. Camus looked up at the faint light high above, hearing the wind whistle eerily through the space, filling her with a sense of hopelessness. She thought to herself, maybe it's better if I die like this. Master, you sacrificed your life for mine, and you must be laughing at how ridiculous I am. But I tried everything. I no longer crave life. Suddenly thinking of Viker, Camus felt a deep sense of regret and thought, the one thing I regret the most is that, in the end, I still couldn't be him again. She tiredly closed her eyes, gave up, and silently thought, well, I guess we'll just reunite in the afterlife. Out of nowhere, a sharp voice rang out, you seem like someone still holding on to life. Camus was startled, confused, and opened her eyes. There was no one else in the basement except for Snake's body still lying beside her. She whispered in confusion, I heard a voice. Am I hallucinating? But the voice clarified, I'm not a hallucination. I came because I felt your desire. Camus, exhausted, whispered, I only read about this in books. Are you a demon? The voice cheerfully replied, yes, what do you know about demons? Then the voice switched to a more negotiative tone. This could be quick. I can use my power to save you in exchange for us making a contract. What do you think? Camus weakly moved her lips and muttered, no, I don't want to live anymore. The demon was puzzled. Then tell me, what do you want? Camus asked quietly, what do I want? The demon's voice echoed around her, flickering like a shadow. That magic circle. You want to bring the dead back, don't you? You want to reunite with someone who's gone? The demon grinned widely, its voice sharp with excitement. That's exactly my power. I am Stare, the demon who rules over death and decay. It stared at Camus' lifeless, hopeless face, then sweet-talked her. She will help you meet the one you want to bring back. So sign the contract with me. In Camus' mind, the words Snake had said to her before pushing her back into life still echoed. I wish for you to meet the one you love. Thinking of this, she slowly closed her eyes and with a detached voice, whispered, all right, sign the contract. She slowly spoke to the demon. I thought I had done everything I could, but if there's still another way I haven't tried. The demon grinned, eagerly waiting for each of her words. For the first time, Camus opened her eyes wide, felt a spark of determination rise within her, and firmly declared, I won't give up. After a long time, Camus finally returned to the Morgue family's grand hall. The servants hurriedly ran around when they saw her arrive. That's Miss Camus. Quick, bring her inside. As soon as Adolphe heard that Camus had come back, he rushed over to find out what was going on. He froze when he saw her walking confidently into the hall. Staring at her, he gasped, Camus. Camus was no longer the same person she had been before. Half of her hair had turned silver white and dark circles under her eyes had spread down to her lower eyelids. Her face still showed no emotion. Even when her concerned uncle asked, Camus, do you have any idea how worried I've been about you? He immediately noticed her changed hair color and panicked asked, what happened to your hair? What have you been doing these last 10 days? Don't tell me it was that old man Snake. Before he could finish his sentence, Camus coldly brushed past him without saying a word. Adolphe stared after his niece, and she continued walking, coldly muttering only one sentence to him. Sorry, uncle, I'm really tired. The demon seer appeared, floating beside Camus and teasing her with a mocking question. Is that so, girl? It's been a long time since you've seen your dear uncle, and you just ignore him like this. Camus was annoyed and muttered to herself, Shut up, seer. She threatened Seer, saying, if you can't prove you're useful, I'll break this contract. The demon dragged out his words lazily, I know. And that's how the contract between Camus and Seer was formed. The contract stated that Seer, the higher demon, would grant Camus Morgue a portion of his power and help her find Viker van Baskerville. In exchange, Camus Morgue would surrender control of her body to Seer for one day, losing all consciousness during that time. In the end, Camus Morgue would be forbidden from mentioning anything about Seer or demons. Because of the contract, Camus gained two abilities from Seer, the power to find anything she desired and the ability to resurrect the dead. That's how Camus was able to track down the remaining strands of her sister Rosie's hair and bring Rosie back to life. Seeing Rosie in the flesh, Camus couldn't hold back her tears. She rushed forward, hugging Rosie tightly, sobbing as she called out the name of her little sister, who had once been kidnapped and killed by barbarians. Still, Camus wasn't completely satisfied. She had higher expectations for Seer. The demon flies around naked every day within its spell circle, but it always gives me the same answer. I'm surprised too. This is the first time I've encountered something like this. I can't sense the soul of Viker, the one you're searching for. Despite her disappointment, Camus remained resolute. She told herself, I can't give up. During this time, each day, Camus trained in isolation to avoid her family and took care of Rosie. At night, she would search for Viker. As time passed, she grew more distant from her mother, her brother, and her entire family, but she didn't have time to worry about that anymore. For Camus, finding Viker was her only goal. She was willing to spend all of her time trying to recreate the perfect resurrection spell. That day, while she was working diligently in her office, someone came to meet Camus. She turned around, glared at him, and snapped. Sensing his presence, "Who are you? How did you get in here?" He grinned, showing his teeth, and responded mockingly, "As for humanity, I'm not here to see you." He was none other than the Nith Corpse Dantalion. In his true form, he grinned widely and called out to Camus, "Bring Seer here." From that day on, Rosie disappeared. As soon as Camus went to confront Seer, the latter mocked her and denied everything, answering casually, "My comrade, the Nith Corpse, said he was looking for a subordinate." It was by chance that Camus saw her again, half hidden, as if searching for something. It was a tough task, and so, Dantalion, Seer's ally, along with another demon, took Rosie and disappeared without a trace. Camus was furious. She yelled at the demon, "How dare you let my sister go?" In response, Seer simply shrugged indifferently and replied, "If something happens, I'll just make another one for you." "Don't be so upset." Camus gritted her teeth, clenched her fists, and hissed through her teeth. A demon's true nature was still that of a demon. On the day Camus set out to find Rosie in the orphanage dormitory hallway, she witnessed a miracle. Just as she had brought Rosie back to life in her hands, that person appeared. Hound, the one who coldly aimed an arrow at her, yet from his eyes to his very presence, he gave off the familiar feeling of a Baskerville hunting dog. At that moment, in the illusion created by Viker, Camus broke down in tears as she heard the voice she had been waiting for so long. "It's been a while," Camus mourned. In front of her was Viker, looking at her through a small crack in the wall. He flashed a playful smile and remarked, "You changed a lot." Camus couldn't say a word. She could only hold back tears, feeling a deep, painful sadness. All the grief and frustration she kept bottled up for so long now spilled out like a flood, overwhelming everything. Viker walked around the wall, moving toward Camus. She sat still, staring at him, lost in her thoughts of hurt and betrayal. "You disappeared without a trace, and now you show up acting so arrogant. If you were still alive, why did you look for me? Do you even know how much I suffered? I traded 1,000 things just to see you again." Even though she was angry with Viker, Camus couldn't say a word as he approached her. He stood in front of her and asked directly, "Did you sign a contract with a demon? What's going on?" Camus remained silent, lost in thought. She wanted her final moments to be the best memory Viker would have of her. She stared at his face, which had become much more hardened over time, and silently told herself, "No need to ask. Just by looking into your eyes, I can see everything you've been through. Unlike me, who has ruined everything, you've grown so much." When she stayed silent, Viker nervously called out, "Camus more." Because of the contract with Seer, Camus couldn't speak, and she had already given all of her time to the demon. Despair filled her mind as she thought, "My time is running out. Soon, he'll have to fight Seer again. The least I can do now is make sure he doesn't have to fight alone one more time. Finally, I get to see you again." Instead of responding to Viker, Camus whispered a sentence as if saying goodbye. "Thank you for recognizing me. Thank you for finding me." Viker's eyes widened when he realized something was wrong. Camus was sitting in the middle of a magic circle, surrounded by sharp spikes that suddenly shot up from the ground, all pointing directly at her. She tried to smile through her tears and gave a compliment. No perfect score, but Camus tried to smile as brightly as she could, despite the tears streaming down her face. The spikes were ready to take her life. She gently spoke to Viker. "Live happily. Live for both of us." Before long, blood was spreading across the ground. Camus opened her eyes wide, her face covered in blood. But it was Viker's blood. He had somehow rushed to her side, pulling her tightly into his arms, using his body as a shield to take all of the spike's blows. Camus froze in shock, her voice trembling as she stammered, "Why did you?" Even though the spikes had pierced his body, for Viker, this was still too light a price. He softly spoke to her. "I know you couldn't tell me everything because of the contract with that demon." Camus burst into tears in panic when she realized that Viker had once again thrown himself in front of her to protect her. She sobbed and asked, "Why did you do this again?" Viker gently tried to calm her down. You didn't use any lethal moves when facing me, and if ending your life is your way of telling me you can't talk about this." He smiled softly and whispered in her ear, "Then don't worry, I'll take care of everything." His eyes burned with anger, red as though the killing intent was rising within him. In that moment, Camus was no longer in his thoughts. Seer had taken over her body, revealing herself not as his crush, but as the demon seer. She grinned widely, filled with excitement, but Viker could see through it. He gritted his teeth and told himself, "Because I will never lose to a demon." The battle with the 8-corpse seer began, a threat of S+ danger level, with the demon's size still unknown. The site of discovery. Deep inside the door of destruction, the snake Wum, also known as the 8-corpse, a natural enemy of humans and one of the 10 disasters, unkillable and immortal, as stated in the 10 Commandments. The herds and beasts shall perish 10 to 1. After a brief reunion, Camus disappeared into Viker's embrace. In her place was the corpse seer, who remained still in Viker's arms, mockingly greeting him. "Nice to meet you." Viker didn't move, still holding her, but his gaze had turned to one of disgust. She innocently asked, "So, you're Viker, huh? I've heard a lot about you from my roommate." He coldly questioned, "What happened to Cam Moore?" She let out a giggle, teasing, "What's the matter? Are you worried?" She lowered her head, grinning with satisfaction, and purposely opened the third eye on her forehead, showing Viker the image of Camus, motionless and trapped inside her head. With a smug tone, she replied, "Camus is fast asleep inside me now, because I have control over her body today." She suddenly switched to a fake innocent tone, asking, "But how much longer are you going to keep holding me?" Before Viker could respond, skeletal white arms shot toward him, holding sharp spears. The sounds of collisions echoed. Viker easily broke free from the surrounding circle and landed in front of Seer and her army of death soldiers. Seer blew her soldiers away. Slowly, she walked toward Viker, a wide grin on her face as she asked, "We're inside Andromalius's unique connection space. Looks like you're the demon hunter who killed my comrade. I never would have guessed the one Camus Morgue has been searching for is a demon hunter." Seer suddenly paused. She stroked her chin thoughtfully, then frowned and muttered to herself, "But something doesn't add up. How could a human possibly know about the 10 most powerful demons?" She took another step closer to Viker, questioning him as she moved. "I can't even see your soul with my demon sight. Are you really from this world?" Viker stayed silent in response. Seeing he wouldn't answer, Seer grinned widely and asked again with a teasing tone, "Why so cold? What if I told you the tragic story of Camus Moore? Would you answer then?" She stared straight at Viker, her voice dripping with sarcasm. To meet a young man again, and she risked everything to perform the ultimate forbidden resurrection spell. It's quite the tragic tale. Viker kept his gaze fixed on the demon without responding. The wounds on his body were gradually healing. The demon continued to use Camus's story as a weapon. Of course, the girl had failed in her attempt, resulting in her body becoming completely immobile. Left sprawled out on the shattered floor of the ruined basement, she had tried everything and no longer had any will to live. But now came the interesting part. Seer suddenly burst into laughter. She squinted at Viker, her eyes full of challenge, and spat out a boastful remark, her laughter echoing with arrogant pride. She said, "I, a demon, am her new hope." Her words only made the anger in Viker's eyes grow deeper. He glared at her as her mocking words continued stinging like cruel jabs. "You know, after we made the pact, hearing the despair in Camus's heart for you, it's truly pitiful." Immediately, Seer mimicked the extreme despair that Camus experienced every day, when she would constantly pull her hair, cry uncontrollably, and slowly destroy herself like a madwoman. "I'm sorry for leaving you alone, Viker. I wish I hadn't been kidnapped by those barbarians. I should have died. Maybe you'd still be alive. Well, why didn't you come find me? No, don't leave me alone." Seer lowered her voice, quoting one of the things Camus often said, "I miss you so much." As soon as she finished, Viker charged at her in a rage. He didn't say a word, just swung his sword at her. Seer didn't even try to dodge. Instead, she stood proudly, eyeing the glowing red blade of his sword and boldly declared, "It seems you know a lot about contracts with demons. If I die, Camus dies too." Seer laughed loudly, clearly enjoying herself. "You can't kill the girl who's been waiting for you all this time, can you?" With that, Seer unleashed a massive magic circle, summoning a monstrous skeleton creature with a long snout, its jaws wide open, ready to snap at Viker. He quickly leaped out of its reach, his face contorted in annoyance, and aimed his sword at the beast. Viker tried to use the Baskerville claws to slash the monster into 100 pieces like he always did. However, to his surprise, the creature remained completely unharmed, not even a scratch. Seer seemed to enjoy watching his failure and laughed mockingly. "Did you really think I would use magic that you could easily shore, like Camus's magic? How could a rookie like you possibly affect my raw power?" No sooner had she finished speaking than the monster charged forward, slamming into Viker. It shoved him hard against a distant stone, aiming for the sharpest part of it, and brutally drove his body into the rock with unimaginable force. Viker slumped motionless, his head bowed at the foot of the stone. Seer let out a satisfied shriek. "Forget about saving Camus. You're going to die by my hands." Suddenly, Viker remembered a few years ago when he had faced Madame Eight Legs alone in the forest. He wondered, did Camus Mort make a pact with a demon just to save me? Does that mean that his future, turning from a hero to a demon's pact, was because I was in that forest? To destroy the demon that made a pact with humanity, it's necessary to kill the person who signed that pact with the demon. This was something Viker had known for a long time. Viker suddenly remembered the moment when his killing intent flared up intensely as he said something before Camus left. He wondered to himself, asterisk, why did I say that? I'll never back down in front of a demon, asterisk. He remained still, head bowed as if defeated, questioning himself. Asterisk, did I say that just to comfort Camus in her final moments? Was that why I said something I can't actually do, asterisk? While Viker was still lost in his thoughts and inner turmoil, Seer's tentacle reached out and wrapped around his calf. She stepped forward, sighing in frustration. Seems like you think too much while you're fighting. She bent down, swinging her tentacle tail with force, launching Viker into the air and violently smashing him into the statue of Osiris. Viker appeared disoriented, not resisting at all. He was pinned against the statue, his body limp, with only one thought running through his mind. Asterisk, I knew it. Asterisk. He was torn apart by one thought. If he didn't defeat the 10 most powerful demons, humanity would face an era of extinction. He had to choose between Camus Morgue and all of humanity. Between these two choices, he knew exactly what to pick. But right now, Viker saw the image of Camus, her face breaking down in tears. He understood the sacrifices she had made to save him. He whispered to himself, as long as there's even the tiniest glimmer of hope, I'll hold on to it. A sudden determination returned to Viker's eyes, his resolve hardening. He had made up his mind. He would not become a hero, sacrificing the people he loved just to save the world. Seer stepped over the corpses of her minions and stood face to face with Viker. She looked at his broken body and mocked him. Unbelievable, Nith Corpse and 10th Corpse were defeated by such a weakling. Seer growled, raising her hand ready to strike. Her rage burned hot, having lost 2 of her closest allies. She snapped his full aim in anger. Viker van Baskerville, do you realize that you're the reason we've been delayed in opening the portal to the demon world? Seer seemed like she wanted to release all her anger onto Viker's body with that attack. She drove her arm and sharp claws straight into his chest, shattering the Osiris statue that had been holding him. She slammed him into the broken statue, and he felt completely powerless to resist. He trembled as he raised his arm towards Seer. Seeing his weak effort, the demon mocked him. Are you still thinking about saving Camus? A little rookie fresh out of school like you? Seer squinted and laughed dismissively, sneering. You're just a pathetic human, hoping for a miracle. Viker muttered, barely moving his lips. A miracle, huh? Suddenly, he grabbed hold of Seer's horns, catching her off guard. He pushed himself up, lifting his body away from the demon's claws, gritting his teeth as he hissed. I'm actually starting to like what you just said. In an instant, Viker slammed his head straight into Seer's third eye. The eye shook violently, overwhelming her with pain and shock, leaving her temporarily paralyzed. Viker pressed closer to her third eye, gritting his jaw and shouting, Camus Morgue, can you hear me? Seer was pinned down by Viker's horns. He moved closer and tried to send a message to Camus. It will be hard for me to kill this demon and save you alone. His voice echoed in Seer's mind where Camus was trapped. You have to resist the contract. The bond that ties your soul to the demon isn't absolute. You can break it because you're a magical genius. Camus, still dazed and under Seer's control, could hear his voice reaching her ears. Your soul will burn as the price of breaking the pact, but I'll kill the demon the moment that happens. Viker used all of his remaining strength. He grabbed both of Seer's horns and shouted, hoping Camus would hear him. Together, we'll create a miracle. Viker's words angered the demon. She shot him a hateful look, then kicked him away with disgust, snarling, you crazy mutt. Her kick sent Viker flying, crashing into the ground and completely destroying the Osiris statue. She landed and frustrated, snapped at him. Become my undead soldier. I'll make you work to replace 10 Corpse and 9th Corpse. You'll be the one to wipe out humanity. Viker clapped his hands together and struggled to sit up. Part of his armor had been torn apart, but his body was already starting to heal. He looked down at the numerous stab wounds on his chest and, with determination, stepped toward the demon, growling through clenched teeth. I'll kill you, demon. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. It was strange. The letter Hugo had sent to Viker earlier now resurfaced in his consciousness. He realized to his surprise that the contents of that letter, something he had thought was completely unreliable, was now his only hope. He pulled out his sword and began walking towards Seer, but his mind was still racing. He couldn't believe that, of all people, Hugo would be the one to help him. His gaze shifted to the intact statue still standing inside the protective barrier, the towering figure of Hugo le Baskerville. Seer, however, had grown serious. She changed her form, drew out her wicked scythe, and slowly approached Viker, determined to destroy him. Her eyes lit up with a fierce glow as she coldly cursed Die, Viker van Baskerville. Viker raised his glowing red sword. The Beelzebub sword shone brightly, radiating an energy that seemed to thirst for demon blood. He stared at Seer, clenching his fist, silently telling himself, Asterisk, I never thought I could become a master swordsman Asterisk. Inside Seer's mind, Camus remained fast asleep, held under the woman's grip. His immobile body was bound to Seer's flesh. In the letter Viker received from Hugo was written, when you reach the rank of a high-level swordsman, the fang technique you are using is still just an incomplete rough 7 fang. To perfect this 7 fang, you must become a master swordsman. For this reason, I will share with you the process I went through to become a master swordsman. I became a master swordsman shortly after you were born. I've told you this story before. However, after I lost Roxana and Penelope, I fell into a deep despair. I spent all my time consumed by madness, wanting nothing more than to become a swordsman. At that time, my rank was that of a top-tier swordsman. To become a swordsmanship master, I tirelessly practiced my techniques. But then, one day, Hugo laid down his sword. Reflecting on that terrifying moment, Hugo wrote, no matter how much time I spent training, I still couldn't become a true master of the sword. Hugo had practiced so much that his hands became calloused and rough. He wrote about the days that followed. At that point, I felt utter despair and was desperate for a solution. I began searching through the ancient library, and finally I found it. The teachings left by the swordsmanship masters of old were passed down to their successors. The book said, to become a top-tier swordsman, one must discard all emotions. However, to become a true master of the sword, one must rediscover all emotions. Hugo wrote, I followed this teaching and made every effort to learn how to feel joy, anger, sorrow, and even excitement. I tried countless ways to become happy, angry, sad, and even thrilled. However, forcing myself to create emotions has many side effects. At certain moments in life, I end up laughing when I should be angry. I get angry when I should be happy. It ruins every feeling I should be expressing. So the path to becoming a swordsmanship master feels like a maze with no way out. In order to satisfy my cravings, which I couldn't fulfill just by gripping my sword, I used my strength to revive my family and had many sons to increase my own power. According to family tradition, I sent the newborn children to the swordsmanship origin, but I realized something very strange there. That day was the day Viker Rewind jumped into the river. Not only Hugo, but all the overseers of the Baskerville family were frozen in shock by his unusual and unexpected action. Remembering that day, Hugo wrote, I don't know why a newborn, who knows nothing, had to struggle in such despair. Why did that child endure the sharp pain as the rushing river claimed its hold on their body like that? After witnessing that scene, something began to stir inside my chest. It was the joy of discovering a talent mixed with the anger that I had sent these young children to such a cruel place. It was also the sadness from the wounds on the child's body and mind, as well as the excitement about what the child's future might hold. Amidst all these overwhelming emotions, I realized something. The very next day, I became a sword master. The day Hugo mentioned, it was he who grabbed Viker and pulled him out of the river just before he drowned in the filthy waters. Hugo continued writing, including Pomerian and becoming a sword master. You have given me everything. My son, the path to becoming a sword master lies in your ability to feel the complex emotions of others. If it were you, I believe you could become a sword master. With love, your dear father. These words from Hugo echoed in Viker's mind as he fought the demon seer. While trying to defend against one of her attacks, Viker suddenly remembered the contents of the letter and frowned, thinking to himself, to my dear son, I can't believe he has become someone completely different from who he was in his past life. He looked at Seer, the woman who was excitedly preparing to unleash a new magic spell right at his face. He told himself, in order to destroy Seer's magic, I need to become a master swordsman. I have to figure out how to do that on my own since I don't have any divine power to rely on right now. Seer's magic created a massive field of giant white bone thorns, sending Viker flying off the ground. His mind was still preoccupied with thoughts. According to what Hugo said, there was anger and maybe even sadness within him. Viker had been beaten badly. He couldn't defend against the demon's deadly attack. He fell straight to the ground, bouncing away like a ball. Seer watched him with excitement, smirking arrogantly. However, she wasn't complacent. She immediately became serious, clenching her fists. In front of her, Viker had gotten back on his feet. His body was broken and full of holes, but the fire of determination still burned brightly in his eyes. In situations like this, all it took was a confident smile. He silently told himself, but inside he was overwhelmed with joy and excitement. His attitude made the demon wary. She hissed, "I asked you a question." With a spiteful sneer, she unleashed a series of vicious attacks at Viker, then growled in frustration when he didn't respond. "I'm talking to you." Viker stood motionless, watching as her strike tore through the air toward him, his eyes wide open. Her blow ripped through the ground, shaking the very earth. She sent Viker flying again, even grazing his leg lightly. He clenched his jaw, fighting to hold back the pain. For a brief moment, as he felt the flicker of emotion, Viker tried to use his seventh fang. He charged at Seer as one of his legs slowly began to regenerate. He swung his sword down, fully focused on the incomplete fang technique. Seer easily knocked his blade aside, a mocking grin spreading across her face. She squinted at him, disgust and disdain in her eyes, then smirked, saying, "You're not very bright, are you?" She grabbed Viker's face, surprising him, then sighed and said, "You can't break my shield." She slammed him hard to the ground, her voice full of excitement as she hissed, "With this attack, dream on." She tightened her grip on Viker's neck, squinting as she smiled and said, "I don't know what you think you're aiming for, but you really believe Camus is going to wake up and break the pact with me." With that taunting remark, Seer pressed Viker deeper into her magic circle. From within, twisted, blood-red hands began to reach out. They stretched toward his face, and slowly, they drove their sharp, monstrous fingers into his skin. The hands pinned Viker in place with dark magic as Seer tilted her head back and laughed, enjoying herself, and started casting another spell. She grinned and hissed, "Let's see how you handle this one." A new magic circle appeared in the sky. From it, dozens of giant demonic hands reached down, ready to strike Viker with the Buddha's palm. The entire area shook. The ancient swords on the tombs vibrated loudly, and dust filled the air. Viker lay motionless in a deep pit, his body shattered. One of his arms had been crushed beyond recognition. He coughed weakly, blood splattering across his battered face. Seer seemed frustrated when he saw that Viker was still alive despite everything. He forced himself to sit up, though his arms still couldn't regenerate right away. The demon started grumbling, clearly annoyed. "After everything you've been through, you're still not dead. Are you even human?" Even though Viker had survived the attack, he couldn't recover as quickly as before. Exhausted, he lowered his head and thought, "Just standing up is hard. I can't regenerate like I used to with the salamander swamp's healing powers," but a flash of Camus appeared in his mind. She had cried in shock when he took the hit meant for her earlier. Thinking about how Camus had planned to end her own life to take down the demon for him, Viker pushed himself to his feet. He encouraged himself quietly. "I need to get up and keep going." He grabbed the shoulder where his arm used to be, gritted his teeth, and told himself, "No matter how many times I have to do this." Suddenly, a voice rang out. "Idiot, that's not the expression I wanted to see." Viker froze, stunned. With his remaining eye, he stared at Seer in disbelief. Her face suddenly twisted in shock. She gasped in embarrassment and exclaimed, "What? How is that possible?" Camus appeared out of nowhere, tearing through the demon's flesh and stepped into view. She smiled at him, proudly declaring, "Just like you said, I did it." Seeing her suddenly wake up, the demon fell into a state of panic and shock. In rage, she hissed, "Camus Moore, if you dare break the pact, your soul will be torn to pieces." Ignoring her threats, Camus focused on tearing Seer's body apart as much as she could. She looked at Viker, full of hope, forcing a smile, and shouted, "I can't hold out much longer, so go ahead, stab her." Then she joked, "If you fail, my neck will be your sword's hilt." Viker chuckled helplessly. He sighed, "At a time like this, you really live up to the title of hero." She too was perfect, with no flaws at all. Camus's hand shook uncontrollably as the demon Seer tried to regain control of her body. She kept smiling, teasing him with a playful question. "Now you're noticing?" Her smile faded into helplessness as Seer fought back, rising forcefully and slowly swallowing her up. She struggled to remind Viker, "Show me what it means to love someone." Seer had taken back control and shoved Camus deep inside. Enraged, she cast a new magic circle and hissed, "You crazy bastards." With a flick of her wrist, she summoned a swarm of white bone tentacles that charged at Viker. She shouted angrily, "Do you really think you can pierce my armor?" Viker's Beelzebub sword rose high into the air. He effortlessly cut through the tentacles, confidently moving forward. Seer hesitated, shocked by the sudden change. Viker also felt something stirring in his chest. He wondered, is this what he meant when he said the heart could overflow with emotions? For the first time, he could feel things he'd never felt before. Even though Camus was trapped inside Seer, she still made Viker feel a sense of joy because she hadn't forgotten him. And even when she woke up after his desperate calls, it made him angry, because a future hero still so wounded shouldn't have been in that condition. When Camus truly woke up after Viker's calls, she started crying. It filled him with sadness to see her struggling like that. But in the end, Viker was happy, almost as if he had stepped into the world inside the demon, and in front of Camus, he waited for her to wake up. He smiled with the thought, but I'm so glad because we've been able to reunite perfectly like this. These are the feelings rising inside me. With those complex emotions, Viker's sword had already awakened, preparing for the seventh perfect fang of the Baskerville family. Viker raised his sword, a proud smile on his lips. With a single swift and tender strike, the upper and lower halves of Seer's body were officially separated. It happened so fast, she didn't even have time to realize what had just occurred. She glanced at him in shock, and then her body began to explode. All humans wore a pair of 5-colored glasses that didn't suit them. Yet those who could see beyond these glasses could perceive things that ordinary people couldn't, and easily sliced through anything. Those people, the ones who had reached the ultimate realm, were honored as masters of the sword. And right now, Viker stood among them, his Beelzebub sword having torn apart the body of the 8-corpse seer. The demon's body shattered into pieces, completely returning her form to Camus Moore. Before vanishing completely, Seer was still stunned. The remaining eye of hers widened in shock, filled with humiliation. In terror, she screamed, "Impossible." Then stammered, "I still have a mission to open the gate." Her last words dissolved into the air, just like Seer's body. Viker stood frozen, gazing up at the fiery red sky inside the demon barrier of Andromelius. His body was far from healed, with his arms still missing, not yet restored. He remained silent, thinking to himself, "I feel like I've always worn outdated clothes. Right now, I can clearly sense that my strength, vision, and judgment have surpassed the extraordinary. These are things I couldn't feel before when the Holy Maiden's magic was awakened." Suddenly, Viker remembered something just as important. He quickly turned around, curious and asking himself, "Camus Morgue, is she all right?" Behind him, Camus was lying unconscious on the ground. He quickly turned and rushed toward her, silently hoping, "Please, I hope we can reunite after such a long time of waiting." However, Viker was exhausted. His body couldn't recover quickly with the healing abilities from the barrier. His steps began to stagger. Finally, when he was close to Camus, he collapsed, losing consciousness right next to her. At that moment, Andromalius's barrier ring glowed brightly. From the ring, a pillar of bright purple light shot straight up into the sky. Its light shattered the barrier, and the reality of the sky slowly returned. The demonic barrier vanished, leaving Viker and Camus lying unconscious in a forest near the academy. The little spider was finally able to reunite with Viker. It anxiously jumped out and bounced beside him, trying to wake him up. No matter how much Agricola tried to act tough, Viker remained still, unresponsive. Meanwhile, someone was approaching him. The spider, lying there in a feigned state, suddenly jerked in surprise when it noticed the person coming closer. Rosie found her way here. She glared at Viker, her face blank, filled with the emptiness of a zombie. Immediately, the spider jumped up, glaring at Rosie with hostility. It tensed its body, ready to fight, even though it was smaller than her hand. Rosie reached out, but she didn't touch Viker. She was only here to take Camus back. Just as the two women were helping each other away, Viker regained consciousness. He struggled to rise, clutching his injured shoulder, and hurriedly called out to Rosie, "Wait." Rosie stopped and glanced at Viker, silently listening to what he had to say. She could still move, which meant Camus must be okay, right? That was a relief. In the distance behind Viker, there was a commotion. He knew that the royal army and the academy professors would be here soon, so he quickly turned to Rosie and said, "It's unfortunate that Camus and I can't meet right now, but it's better for both of us if we leave here as soon as possible." He then reached in his pocket, rummaged around, and quickly said, "I need you to do something for me. Please give this to Camus." Rosie swiftly caught the item he tossed to her. He smiled at her and politely added, "If she wants to see me, tell her to go to that place." Rosie looked at the item in her hands with curiosity, but didn't say anything. She nodded in agreement, then hurriedly helped the unconscious Camus leave, leaving Viker behind. Meanwhile, at the academy, the students were in a frenzy, gathering around to hear the gossip from a female student. She ran in, clearly panicked, eager to deliver the latest news. The one who attacked the main academy was the Night Hound. The students erupted in chatter. Is that true? How bad was the damage? Then one of them added, surprisingly, there wasn't any damage at all. Viker's group was still in shock after their unexpected encounter with Camus. Bianca anxiously grabbed the edge of her shirt, fearfully mumbling, "So that girl with the skull mask is a dark sorceress." Tudor, equally shaken, seemed as if he'd just been shocked by electricity. He rested his chin on his hand and nodded in agreement, adding, "Yes, that's right. But it looks like she's fighting the Night Hound. Honestly, it's embarrassing to admit, but I wouldn't dare get in between them again." Piggy was so nervous he could barely stand. He confessed in a terrified whisper, "I was so scared I almost passed out." Meanwhile, even a warrior like Sancho was shaken as he remembered the moment the Night Hound violently dragged Camus out of the academy. He broke into a cold sweat and sighed. I've never seen anyone as terrifying as the Night Hound. The only one who might top him is Thanos, and that's just because of his infinity gauntlet. In the middle of the chaos, Viker returned to the academy. He hid his injured body and missing arm under a wizard's cloak. As he walked toward his friends, he chimed in with them. Same, I was so scared. I could barely breathe. When the group realized Viker had just appeared, they were so shocked that they all shouted in unison, Viker, where have you been? We were so worried. The Saintess Dolores rushed toward him. She gave him a stern look and questioned him. Viker, we didn't see you anywhere when we were investigating the situation on this street. Where were you? I know you're not the type to leave your friends behind and run off on your own. Viker hesitated, unsure of what to say. He hadn't figured out a reason for this situation yet. Just as he was about to be exposed by the Saintess, 3 saviors appeared. They all shouted at once, You, Connor! Yes, you! How dare you rush out alone to protect everyone? Why would you do that? The 3 fairies had come to his rescue. It was the Baskerville trio, disguised as 3 efficient maids. They looked furious and scolded him loudly. Why are you doing everything by yourself like this? What will that make us look like? Don't do it again next time. The other 2 joined in. Don't let it happen again. They surrounded Viker, acting as if he had secretly taken credit for their work, scolding him in front of his friends. Watching this, Sinclair chuckled softly. What's this? Is he starting a gang or something? Meanwhile, the Saintess had realized that Viker had quietly gone to protect the academy and claimed credit for the 3 brothers' efforts. Her doubts disappeared. She stopped questioning him and, feeling guilty, thought to herself, I almost misunderstood the situation. A long, endless night passed and dawn began to break. Viker looked up at the brightening sky, worried, and wondered. She'll be okay, right? The students slowly began to disperse and return to their dorm rooms. Viker remained standing, staring at the sunrise, silently thinking, I hope I'll see you again soon, Camus. At that moment, the first rays of dawn streamed through a massive hole in the Morgue family's dark hall, where Rosie stood waiting in front of a giant magic sphere. Finally, Camus stepped out. Her body was drenched, having just gone through the healing process. She looked down at herself, muttering to Rosie, My body is completely broken, all because Seer went crazy and broke the pact. Because of that, I couldn't even say goodbye to him. How could I have thought he was dead? Rosie stayed silent, listening to the soft whispers from Camus, but the fact that he was doing everything he could to protect her, even though he was badly injured himself, made her reflect deeply. Suddenly, Camus's expression changed. Her face lit up, her eyes sparkling with wonder. She cupped her flushed cheeks and asked herself, full of emotion, could it be? Because he sees me as something precious. She remembered the brief moment when Camus had torn into Seer's flesh and exchanged a few words with Viker. With that confident smile on his handsome face, Camus couldn't help but sigh in appreciation, thinking, this time I fought him, I did back down. Satisfied, she closed her eyes, nodding to herself. Viker and I reached this outcome together, and we didn't give up. Camus suddenly turned and squinted at the person beside her. She gave a wry smile and asked, What do you think? Do you think Viker is really worth risking my life for? Seer? Her smile twisted into something more mocking as she looked at Seer's pitiful form. The demon hadn't died yet. Instead, it had shrunk, now resembling a small sparrow, floating weakly beside Camus. She cried out, pulling at her own ears in frustration, then screamed in protest, Why did you break our pact? This is deceit. Camus asked seriously, I have full control over my body now. Did Viker really sever the pact? Why aren't you dead? Seer angrily replied, It's because you broke my 12-hour pact. You were punished for that, and that's why I'm still alive a little longer. Camus sneered, waving his hand to use magic to suppress Seer, then smirked to her, I think I can crush you with magic now. Seer panicked, struggling to endure Camus's magic, then let out a desperate cry. It hurts so much. I can't even handle this little bit of magic anymore. Tears and snot ran down her face as she sobbed, pleading, I'll do anything you want, just don't kill me. Camus teased, anything, huh? She immediately grinned wickedly, narrowing her eyes at the demon, full of calculation, cruelty, and declared, Then give me all your power and authority. We don't have a pact anymore. I'm the master now, and you're just a slave. The demon seer sobbed, trembling with frustration and silently crying. She truly was a demon. Camus had spared her life. Powerless, she trudged along, sulking and crying quietly. Seeing this, Camus placed his hands on his hips and thoughtfully said to her, But thanks to you, I was able to meet Viker again. Seer looked confused and asked, So what are you going to do now? Camus innocently asked in return, Should we open the gate? The demon believed him. She jumped up in excitement, looking at Camus with hope and anticipation, and asked, Really? Are you really going to do that? Camus cruelly interrupted. I was just joking. Am I crazy? Rosie stepped forward and helped Camus put on her cloak. She lowered her head and answered the demon. My priority now is recovery. I need to return to the Morgue family estate. Camus suddenly thought of her mother and uncle. She murmured, now that I know Viker is still alive and well, I should also restore what I have broken. With that, she put on her hood, hiding the brief moment of sorrow in her eyes. She sighed and whispered, and I also need to announce my master's passing and honor his memory. The gentle face and soft smile of Snake before he left flashed in Kama's mind. She could still remember the last words he said to her. I hope you can reunite with the people you love. Camus clenched her fist, feeling a wave of emotion as she whispered to herself. Thank you, Master. Because of you, I'll be able to see him again. In her hand was the golden button from the Colossal Academy uniform that Viker had asked Rosie to deliver to her. Camus held the button, smiling softly as she murmured, If I enroll in the academy, I'll be his junior. Camus stepped out from the dark hall and into the sunlight. She smiled and called out, Viker, the moment we meet again, you'll be mine. Her smile was radiant as she tossed her faded hair, her eyes filled with hope and longing, eagerly awaiting the future. Finally, the lively festival at the academy had come to an end. But even though it was over, its echoes still lingered like fading embers. The students continued to chat about what had happened that day. I heard that while the festival was still going on, Nighthound showed up, didn't they? A group of students were murmuring to each other, and it sounded like something very serious was going on. I overheard someone say that he had done something really cruel, but the professors had stepped in to stop him. It was terrifying. This villain should have been thrown into the Luboback dungeon by now. One student sighed and complained, I heard there's another villain who just showed up, a nameless dark sorcerer. Apparently, the two villains fought each other, which allowed the professors to easily overpower them. The students, not fully understanding the situation, were chatting about it excitedly, joking around. But if things had gone wrong, the Nighthound event could have turned into a serious tragedy. In the end, though, it was just another topic for casual gossip. Unlike the lively atmosphere outside the academy, the mood inside the press club's meeting room was tense. Saint S. Dollars had called a meeting and was now shouting at the members demanding, who wrote this article? The article she mentioned was an exclusive report about Nighthound. The headline read, the brutality labeled as Nighthound. Nighthound's crimes had crossed the line. On the day of the festival, Nighthound attacked the Royal Academy. His actions went against humanity and the nation itself. He was a criminal who deserved punishment. During the festival, key structures of the empire were destroyed, including the Royal Bank, the clock tower of the capital, the Indenhentia Institute, and the Royal Memorial. That was the content of the article that made Dolores angry. She glared at the Umber students who were loudly criticizing. Nighthound didn't cause any chaos during the festival. That disturbance was caused by the nameless dark mage. She continued to scold the group of students. This article is implying that Nighthound came to the festival and massacred students. Even though he is a criminal of the Empire, the truth is that he didn't do anything during that festival. So this article needs to tone down the emotional bias and be more objective. After hearing her words, Viker's friends fell silent, too scared to move, each of them terrified. Finally, Dolores sighed and complained, enough already. Who wrote this article? Hearing her question, PG and Tutor exchanged nervous glances at Viker, who had been sitting quietly with his head down the whole time. Dolores noticed this. She looked at him with clear disapproval and frustration, asking, Was it you, Viker? Viker calmly responded, I wrote that article under the guidance of Professor Vinci, the club's advisor. Dolores, dissatisfied, slammed her hand on the table and continued, Why did this happen while I was absent? Viker remained calm, replying, During the festival, you were busy with student council matters. Knowing she couldn't blame Viker any further, Dolores sighed in resignation and muttered, But you can't just write things like that without verifying them. With that, she pulled out a stack of notes and placed them on the table in front of the students. She added, These are the official testimonies released this morning by the city guard. They have stated that the person responsible for destroying key landmarks in the capital is not the Nighthound. Dolores explained, The Nighthound's weapon leaves sword marks, but public investigations have shown there are no signs of sword wounds at the recent bombing sites. The only trace found was a series of drag marks, looking like a giant snake slithering through. The villain responsible has an official name. She is Lady Ouroboros. The unidentified villain is suspected to be a woman. Her motives for the attacks remain unclear. Her strength is estimated to be at an elite level, but the weapon she uses is still unknown. Dolores added, because all the witnesses are gone. At this, both Tutor and Sancho turned pale, a chill running down their spines. Dolores glanced at Viker's emotionless face, spread 3 fingers, and continued, That's why you shouldn't carelessly accuse Nighthound of these crimes. We have 3 villains. Shouldn't we make sure we clearly define their wrongdoings? Viker didn't respond, simply nodding quietly as if he understood. A thought crossed his mind. It doesn't matter. I'm just deliberately creating a vague image of Night Hound, because one day Night Hound will be condemned for some suspicious events. Tudor began to think deeply, muttering to himself as he temporarily set aside the Night Hound. Who exactly is this Ouroboros lady anyway? Sancho also fell into thought. Is it true that all we found about her is a trail that looks like a giant snake slithered through? Sinclair suddenly raised his hand to speak, naively asking Dolores, but why didn't everyone figure out that the culprit is a woman? Dolores replied, because at every wreck scene there was a lipstick mark left behind. Dolores slightly grimaced as she remembered the pink lipstick stain on the stone wall, then angrily added, it seems like she wants to show off her crime. Amid the murmurs of their friends around them, Viker remained silent, unresponsive. He was lost in his own thoughts about this person. His eyes gleamed with a cold light as he thought with a sense of resolve. I don't care whether her motives come from admiration or wanting to challenge the Night Hound. No matter the reason, if she gets in the way of my hunt, I'll have to take her out. Just then, Anna burst into the meeting room, kicking the door open with a towering stack of papers in her hands, shouting, I'm here. Dolores frowned as she looked at the pile of papers Anna had just placed on the conference table. She grumbled, Anna, why are there so many papers? Anna looked at everyone seriously and replied, we've gathered a lot of information since the festival ended. She then turned to hand Viker a letter and exclaimed, it's great that you're here, Viker. This letter is for you. Viker took the letter coldly and muttered a quick thank you. He was still irritated by a lot of things, so he just hurriedly opened the envelope, wondering in frustration, a letter for me? To his surprise, the contents of the letter caused his face to darken. He fell silent, unable to speak. His reaction made Sinclair curious, and she stepped forward to ask what's going on. Viker remained silent. Sinclair, now even more curious, glanced at the letter and exclaimed, this is a notice for the first semester tuition payment for the Royal Academy. After receiving the notice, Viker rushed to see his brother Osiris. His niece, Pomerian, was still with Osiris. As soon as she saw Viker, she immediately climbed into his lap, her face glowing with excitement. Osiris, understanding the situation, calmly suggested, I can pay the tuition for you. However, just by looking at Viker's reaction, Osiris realized that money wasn't what his younger brother was worried about. He asked directly, what's really bothering you? Viker didn't hide anything and answered honestly, as I've told you before, I want to keep the fact that I'm a member of the Baskerville family a secret while I'm at the academy. He ruffled his niece's hair, thinking to himself, I don't want my everyday life to be disrupted when people find out that my tuition is being paid with Baskerville money. As soon as his friends learned that the school had asked him to apply for financial aid, the girls didn't hesitate to bring him a maid costume and suggest ways to make money quickly. Just thinking about it made his face tighten. He frowned and thought, only a week left until the tuition deadline, and I really don't want to follow their suggestion. He closed his eyes, sighed, and silently complained, I can get a full scholarship because I lost some points due to my attitude towards studies. Seeing Viker's troubled expression, Osiris pondered and wondered, why does he want to keep his skills a secret like this? He suddenly froze, his eyes wide in shock, quietly thinking to himself, no way, could it be that my younger brother wants to pretend to be a poor CEO just for that ending? He immediately thought back to his own youth when he first entered the academy. He had played the same role, hoping that when the academy was in danger, he could step in, defeat all the monsters, save the students, and shine. He thought, I used to understand this game. I wanted to hide my strength among the weak, so when trouble arose, I'd show up at the perfect moment, like in a movie. Osiris seemed to sympathize. He thought to himself, if that's what he wants, fine. After thinking for a moment, he turned to Viker and said, why don't you try hunting monsters part-time to make some extra money in your free time? Viker blinked in confusion, staring at him. Osiris explained, go to the Scout Guild and hire a scout to help you hunt monsters. That way, your chances of chasing your dream will increase faster. Viker scratched his chin, looking uncertain, and muttered, I'm not sure that's really my dream. He could realize that the dream Osiris was referring to wasn't about hunting monsters. Still, it made more sense than wearing those outfits. Viker immediately began to think, how about the scouts? It just occurred to him that there was a scout he had been thinking about. In Viker's past life, during the era of destruction, there was a warrior who had dedicated himself fully to the human alliance. Most of the books Viker knew about demons and monsters were written by him. Not long after, a research field called monster ecology was established based on this warrior's studies. However, he was just a person from a rural area, so he never really made any connections. Because of that, during a battle with monsters, he had no one to help him and ended up dying on the battlefield very early on. Viker grinned to himself, feeling pleased. I know so much about him. If I can recruit him now while he's still alive and strong, it's all for his future. With that thought, Viker gave a wicked smile. He happily told Osiris, Thank you. I'll do it right away. Just that simple sentence made Osiris' face light up with joy. He smiled contentedly, replying happily, "That's good." He felt a surge of joy and thought to himself, "I've been able to help her." That afternoon, at the Sherpa Scout Guild, cheers erupted outside the building. The guild master is back. Several guild members rushed out to greet him, excitedly shouting, "How was the hunt today?" The guild master, carrying a massive beast that resembled a wild boar, stood at least 3 times his size. He proudly gave a thumbs up and cheerfully responded, "As you can see, this was a successful hunt." The guild master of the scouts was the warrior Viker had thought of. Miniature Pincher, nicknamed Mini Pin, he carried the monster for the cheers of the guild members. Truly living up to his title, he was an elite swordsman at the very top of his class. Mini Pin dropped the creature onto the courtyard floor and chuckled, saying, "All right, I'm going to rest for a bit." With that, he entered the house. But, in stark contrast to his earlier joy, as soon as he reached his room, Mini Pin hid behind a book and sighed. He slumped onto the table, holding his head and groaning. "This month, we're struggling again. This money isn't even enough to feed myself, let alone pay the team," he muttered in frustration. "I can't just do whatever I want because I still have to be careful around those big mercenary groups. Is it really this hard when you don't have anyone backing you up?" Then he fell into a state of self-blame. It was all his fault. If only, when I was younger, I hadn't been tricked while chasing my dreams, I wouldn't be in such a financial mess now. Mini Pin opened the drawer, looking at a crumpled piece of cloth. He held it tightly in his hand and sighed sadly. "I was really foolish. If I had the chance, I would still want to chase my dreams." He hugged the cloth tightly, sighing deeply with worry. On the fabric was the bright red emblem of the prestigious Baskerville family. Mini Pin clenched the fabric in his hand with determination and whispered, "My dream is to join the legendary red-blooded Baskerville family." Little did he know, the person who would change his future was slowly walking into his guild. Viker pulled his cloak tightly around himself and asked a passerby, "Is this the Sherpa Guild where a man named Mini Pin is?" The members who were dealing with the large creature didn't seem too welcoming of a stranger like Viker. One person, irritated and grumpy, snapped, "Are you still a kid? How dare you call our guild leader by his nickname?" Viker calmly replied, "I'm a client here to make a request." The other person, even more annoyed, yelled, "You think just because you're a client, you could be treated like royalty?" Viker didn't waste any time arguing with him and walked straight inside. He muttered, "You're really annoying." The scout, angry at being ignored, lost his temper, charging him and shouting, "You dare." Of course, his attack was nowhere near as fast as Viker's walk. He didn't even come close to touching him. As soon as the others saw this, they rushed toward Viker, shouting to catch him. But Viker easily dodged each one, none of them even laying a finger on him. His speed, like a bolt of lightning, sent the group into a panic. "Who is he? We can't even touch him." Viker pushed through the crowd and leaped up to land on the office window ledge, startling Mini Pin. He calmly opened the door and asked the man, who was still stunned by his sudden appearance, "Is this the president's office? Looking at your build, I'm guessing you're Mini Pin." Mini Pin jumped up from his chair, panicking, and shouted, "Who are you?" Viker responded coolly, "I have a client here to make a request." Mini Pin froze, confused and uncertain, and asked, "A client?" Viker moved like lightning, quickly handing Mini Pin a piece of paper and saying, "This is my request form." Mini Pin was taken aback by his speed. He thought to himself, "He's so fast." Though still flustered, Mini Pin couldn't help but admire Viker. He was so quick that Mini Pin hadn't even had time to react. This guy must be really strong. While reading the paper, Mini Pin stammered, "Sir, even if you're a client, you can't just walk in here without an official request first." His words hung in the air as he finished reading Viker's request form. He was trembling uncontrollably, unable to speak. Viker slowly removed his hat and casually suggested, "The scout I want to hire is you, Mini Pin." He thought to himself, I'll never forget the guy who kept visiting the Baskerville family, hoping to become one of their vassals, *. He looked at Mini Pin's stunned face and asked, "What do you think about joining me?" Mini Pin was still in shock. He stared at the paper, trembling, and stammered, "Why, you're—" He looked up at Viker's strikingly handsome face and suddenly cried out, "You're Viker van Baskerville." The form in his hand clearly read, "Client, Viker van Baskerville." That very night, Viker and Mini Pin set off to hunt monsters. Viker kept his cloak tightly drawn around him, walking in silence while Mini Pin couldn't take his eyes off the order form. He read through it over and over. Client's name, Viker van Baskerville, Colossio Academy, details of the order, hire a guild, target, hunt monsters. Min Pin quickly glanced at Viker, his cheeks turning pink with excitement. He thought to himself in a panic, it really is him. It's Viker, the real Viker in the flesh. Unable to control his admiration, Min Pin rushed forward, bent over at the waist in front of Viker, and stammered loudly, Once again, it's truly an honor for me. His sudden action startled Viker. Minpin stayed bent at a 90-degree angle and shouted loudly, so excited that he stumbled over his words. Mr. VV Viker, I've been so eager to meet you. Viker, startled, motioned for him to be quiet. He softly whispered, and my name isn't VV Viker. Minpin quickly whispered an apology. I'm sorry, honestly, I've always wanted to join the Baskerville family. Viker simply looked at him in silence, thinking to himself, if Minpin wanted to join the Baskerville family now, it must mean he had dreamed of this long before Viker had rewound time. The large man seemed still unable to shake off his excitement. He looked at Viker with pink cheeks and whispered enthusiastically, what I mean is the Baskerville family is the bloodline of the sword that defeated the monsters at the western border. If I joined the Baskerville family, couldn't I learn the invisible sword technique of the Baskerville clan? Then he suddenly became embarrassed, scratched his head, and admitted, they're going to give me land and a house. I know that's the only thing that will make my wife happy. Well, I've also been tricked by some real estate brokers. Now, these things are beyond my ability. Viker stayed silent. He quietly assessed Minipin and thought to himself, forget his appearance, Minipin is still a top-tier swordsman. His skills are high enough to join any elite mercenary group. He smiled and then responded calmly, I can make that dream come true. However, it depends on your actions. Upon hearing that, a big smile spread across Minipin's face. He excitedly shouted, I'll do my best. Immediately, Viker corrected him. Keep it down. Minipin and Viker started their journey in the carriage. As they traveled up the mountain, Minipin listened to Viker explain. I'm on a secret mission, so I need to hide my identity while at the academy. Since this is also a secret to my family, I don't have any other support. That's why I came to find you, the most reliable guild to help pay for my tuition. Minipin felt a knot in his stomach and silently cried when he realized he was being praised. He was overjoyed and thought to himself with misty eyes, asterisk, I'm being praised by Lord Viker, the most respected member of the Baskerville family, asterisk. Viker seriously reminded him, from now on, refer to me as my lord instead of my name. The big guy immediately forgot and shouted loudly, I will remember this, my lord. This made Viker sigh, wondering to himself, asterisk, can he really be trusted, asterisk? Ignoring Minipin's loud outburst, Viker calmly got back to the main point with a straightforward question. Right now, I am a student at the academy. How many types of monsters would it be best for me to hunt? Minipin glanced at him briefly, then confidently answered, there's a type of monster that's not too strong, but can still bring in a decent profit. The hyena gnolls. They're a strange breed with hyena heads and dwarf-like bodies. They live in packs and are found in the high mountains on the outskirts of the imperial capital. Although each individual is only at C+ level, when they gather together in a pack, they become A-level monsters. Minipin continued explaining, hyena gnolls are pretty weak when they're on their own, so even if a first-year student were to capture a bunch of them, it wouldn't raise any suspicions. The royal family considers them a nuisance to industrial development, so there's a bounty for each one captured. Also, you can sell their skin, meat, and bones separately. Viker seemed pleased with his understanding. He thought to himself, Minipin is definitely trustworthy. The carriage stopped. Minipin, just so you know, the hyena gnoll's lair is probably somewhere around here. Just as he said, behind a large bush, there was a group of hyena gnolls wandering around on guard with sharp swords in hand. Minipin and Viker crouched behind some bushes, observing. The scout began to suggest, hyena gnolls have a habit of collecting shiny things. The most common hunting method is to throw glass beads as bait before striking. Viker seemed to have known this would happen, so he wasn't impressed. He casually asked, but that method only works when hunting small groups of them, right? Minipin nervously replied, yes, that's correct, sir. Viker mumbled, then we won't be using that method. At that moment from behind them, high up in the trees, a huge snake-like creature was silently slithering toward them. Though it was quiet, Minipin noticed it. He glanced nervously at the serpent, but before he could make a move, the snake's head suddenly fell to the ground, causing him to jump in surprise. The severed head of the snake landed with a thud right in front of Viker. Minipin immediately realized that Viker was the one who had struck, but the calmness with which he handled it left him stunned. He stared wide-eyed, still in shock, and muttered, he's not even carrying his sword. How did he cut its head off? Viker didn't seem to care about the snake at all. He pointed toward the cart and asked Minipin, do the barrels of rum you're carrying on the cart contain oil? Minipin hesitated, then replied, yes, sir. Viker replied with satisfaction. Good, we can wipe out the whole pack without even lifting a finger. High up in the tree, the body of the monstrous snake-like creature lay still, its blood dripping down in steady streams. Minipin looked up at the still warm blood of the unfortunate beast and panicked, thinking to himself, he's going to conquer the whole pack of gnoll hyenas with just a few barrels of oil, while the Empire's monster hunting team had to give up. He turned to look at Viker, who was smirking with a sinister grin, his eyes bloodshot, clearly excited in a disturbing way. Minnie anxiously wondered, what on earth is he thinking? After retrieving the barrels of oil, Viker and Minnie ventured deeper into the Knoll hyena den. The creatures had already returned to their lair after scouting. Viker hid by the entrance, glancing at the terrifying beasts. The monsters were all gathered there, crowded together, filling the entire cave. Even an experienced scout like Minnie hesitated for a moment before the overwhelming number of creatures. He's silently worried. How is he going to defeat so many Knoll hyenas? If he attacks recklessly, the hyenas will spill out and overrun the nearby villages. Although he felt some anxiety because he didn't fully understand Viker's actions, he had a strong belief in him. He nervously watched him, stepped closer to the cave entrance, and thought to himself, no, there's no way Viker hasn't accounted for this. Looking at the young man he secretly admired, still so confident in front of a pack of monsters, Minnie thought to himself, I'm curious to see how Viker will deal with these Knoll hyenas. After some noise and chaos, all that remained in the dark cave was the sound of the beast's roars. Viker had been planning for this moment for a long time. He imagined the shape of the mountain where the monsters made their lair and told himself there are 3 entrances to the Knoll hyena den on this mountain. This must be the entrance to the lowest level. He sat down in front of the cave entrance, placed his hand on the ground, and closed his eyes. The characteristic red aura of the Baskerville family flickered and danced around his body. He focused on channeling his energy into his hand, silently thinking there's a reason swordmasters are hailed as superhumans. Viker suddenly recalled the time when his energy first exploded after he became a swordmaster. It was powerful enough to shake an entire banquet table. After becoming a master swordsman, he was able to sense the energy within himself much more clearly. He quietly thought to himself that in his current state, energy was flowing through his veins, running all the way down into the earth. For Minnie all he could see was Viker kneeling and doing something he couldn't understand. The space around them remained eerily quiet. However, just a few moments later, loud explosions suddenly erupted from the high mountains. The ground shook violently, sending Minnie into a panic. He screamed out in confusion. What's happening? The hyena-like gnolls inside the cave also sensed the presence of intruders. They immediately rushed toward the cave entrance, where Viker was standing. But before they could leap out, Minnie threw a series of oil barrels down upon them from above. The barrels crashed down, hitting the heads of the monsters and knocking into their jaws. They bit their tongues in pain, tears welling up in their eyes from the agony. The impact caused the barrels to break apart, spilling oil everywhere. Meanwhile, the giant scout kept throwing barrels of oil into the cave. Viker was ready, the torch blazing brightly in his hand. He chuckled, saying, who would have thought I'd use the same tactics from when I lived in the forest, even though they weren't very effective back then? He smirked, glaring at the monsters, and let out a wicked laugh. But this time, I'm only facing Knoll hyenas, not Madam Eight Legs. The Knoll hyenas struggled to get past the oil spread across the ground, trying to rush toward Viker. However, they couldn't outsmart him. They hadn't even made it out of the entrance yet. Viker coldly tossed the blazing torch at the monsters soaking in oil. He laughed cruelly and said with a grim tone, enjoy wriggling while you still can. With just one spark, the hyena gnolls were consumed by the raging flames. Fire is the most dangerous thing in an unknown place because it spreads quickly and the smoke is toxic. Since Viker had blocked all the high exits earlier, the smoke had nowhere to escape, creeping through the Knoll hyena pack, choking them. The fire flared up, blocking the cave entrance. Waves of scorching heat blasted out, making Minnie massive sword tremble behind him. Watching Viker's ruthless and decisive actions, he felt a little uneasy and thought to himself, even though they're just monsters, Lord Viker is slaughtering countless lives without even blinking. He's more brutal and heartless than I thought. Viker turned around and glanced at him. His expression remained calm and serious, even with the roaring flames around them. Minnie exclaimed, so this is a Baskerville family member. I never would have guessed. To me, Lord Viker shines like a perfect saintly figure. He quietly hissed, his eyes gleaming with admiration. He's so cool. Viker seemed flustered, scratching his head and rolling his eyes in annoyance at his companion's idol-like admiration. Smoke was already pouring out from the 2 gates Viker had sealed on the mountainside. After a while, a fire finally died down. Minnie entered the cave first. He carefully examined the monster carcasses, now roasted to a crisp. After confirming they were all dead, he reported with a voice full of awe, Lord, as expected, the Knoll hyenas inside are all dead from smoke inhalation. I thought I'd spent so much time hunting on the battlefield, but now I've learned so much more from you. Viker casually walked in, his tone indifferent as he reminded, stop flattering me. There might still be a few surviving Knoll hyenas, so stay alert. Instead of feeling annoyed by his reminder, Minnie actually felt a warmth in his heart. He smiled broadly, secretly thinking to himself, Viker is worried about me. How sweet is he? Still for him, Minnie Pin only reminded him of the old Chihuahua secretary. The two of them ventured deeper into the cave, with Minnie Pin volunteering to lead the way. As they made their way through the dark, he suddenly stopped, his attention caught by something. Without warning, he drew his sword and struck the cave wall. Viker watched curiously as his companion furiously hacked at the wall and asked, "What's going on?" Minnie Pin, still working to break through the wall with his massive sword, replied, "Just wait a moment, I think I see some signs of human activity here." Finally, the wall collapsed, revealing a small passage ahead. Both of them stared in surprise, eyes wide open. Minnie Pin exclaimed, "This is." Inside the passage was an enormous space, containing a massive mountain of gold. Viker stepped inside, muttering as he observed, "What do we have here? Looks like someone used this place as a vault." Minnie Pin sweated nervously, asking Anne, "Are you jumping to conclusions too quickly? These Knoll hyenas love collecting shiny things. This could just be a collection, right?" Viker tossed a gold coin to him, still carefully watching the coin in his hand as he replied, "Take a look at this." Minnie Pin looked down, the gold coin gleaming brightly in his palm, spotless and flawless. Viker explained, "These coins aren't from any bank. They don't have serial numbers. The Knoll hyenas couldn't have gotten their hands on them." Finally, Minnie Pin understood. He asked bewildered, but who would be bold enough to stash money inside the Knoll hyena's lair? Viker slowly stood up, his eyes fixed on the shining mountain of gold in front of him, and replied thoughtfully, "One thing's for sure. Whoever used this place as a treasure vault had to be strong enough to kill all the Knoll hyenas and steal their gold." Outside the cave, a tall woman suddenly appeared. She walked in, brutally stomping on the charred body of a Knoll hyena with her heel, then sighed and muttered, "Oh wow." She flashed a wide grin, sticking out her tongue to lick her finger, and excitedly murmured, "Looks like a few mice have gotten into my gold box."